Everyone, and welcome once again to the View from the Midwest. It's that time of year, and it's time once again to get back to St. Louis FC football, or soccer as it were, whichever you prefer. So St. Louis FC got things rolling last week with a game against Louisville City FC. It was a draw, so St. Louis didn't necessarily get off to the kind of start that they would have liked in that match. But given the fact that Louisville is still one of the preeminent teams in the Eastern Conference, it was not a bad start to the year at all, especially given the results that St. Louis FC has managed to pull, or lack thereof, really, when you think about it, when they have played against Louisville. Despite the fact that the two have been rivals, it has not been a rivalry necessarily on the pitch. So it was good to get a point out of that game, really. And St. Louis FC comes home. They play the Ottawa Fury, one of the old NASL teams, and St. Louis FC came out of the gates on fire. If you missed this start of this game, if you were still in the tailgate, if you were late getting to the stadium, you missed quite the start to this game, because within the first 10 minutes, there were 3 goals scored. 2 of them belonging to St. Louis FC, and things could not necessarily have started much better overall. St. Louis got a goal in the 5th minute from Christian Walewski, and then a 9th minute goal from Mats Berman, or German. I'm still getting used to some of these new guys and how we're going to pronounce their names and everything. And the thing that was really good, the way that St. Louis FC started, was the fact that they came out, they took the game by the scruff, so to speak, and they really ended up using their speed, their ball control, their skill, just everything that you would expect from a team that's now run by Preki, and they really dominated those opening minutes. Now, Ottawa obviously got back into the game with a goal in the 11th minute, and it would pretty much stay 2-1 throughout most of the game. But for the first half, it was a great first half, a great opening 45 for St. Louis FC, and you really like to see that. The thing that I really liked about the team that's coming in this year is the fact that you didn't see any of that hesitancy. You didn't see any of that letting the game come to them in the first half anyway. The second half was kind of its own animal, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But really, St. Louis FC, you could tell that it was just a completely different team. Now, obviously, it is a completely different team because there are only 3 holdovers from last year. One, Seth Rudolph was in the reserves. David was on the bench, and AJ Cochran was the only starter remaining from last year's team. So, I mean, you've got 10 brand new starters. You're going to have a new team, but it was just a new atmosphere, a new chapter for this club. And it was a great way to get things started for the home crowd. And then things kind of calmed down a little bit. Things kind of smoothed over a little bit. So the only thing that was worrying about the fact that St. Louis FC only was up by a goal at the half is you started to kind of wonder, well, was that just kind of the emotion of playing that first half in front of your home fans for the first time? Because this is just about everybody's first time to play in front of these great St. Louis fans and experience basically a sold-out crowd, over 5,000 people in there. It was great to see just all the East Side, which even when we've had sold-out crowds before, sometimes the East Side, not excluding the Luligans corner, but some of those other ones, the opposite corner, the South corner, hasn't necessarily always been truly full, and they just kind of counted it that. This time, I believe it was a legitimate sellout. Everybody was packed in there, and it was great to see that. But still, you kind of wonder if there was a little bit of emotion that played into that, and there has to be, but you would like to think that St. Louis FC really was as good as they looked in those first 45. The second 45 was a little bit more iffy. Obviously, there were a lot of complaints about the officiating, including myself, even as an official. There were a lot of calls that went unheeded. And granted, it did go both ways, but there's a certain amount that you have to take into account. And I understand that the professional game is officiated at a completely different level. They allowed a lot more physicality, but there was just a lot that went on in that second half that could have been called, wasn't called. There were a few ticky-tack things that were called that shouldn't have been called. And it was just a very oddly officiated game. But ultimately, as an official, when you have both benches screaming at you that you're doing a bad job, obviously that doesn't mean you're doing a good job, but it does mean that you're calling it somewhat down the middle because you've got both sides thinking you're doing a bad job. Um, in the end, St. Louis FC pulls off the win because Ununa Obasi tied up the game in the 83rd minute, but then St. Louis FC scores. It was originally, I believe, credited in the 90th minute. They've apparently changed that to the 88th. Not really sure how you can get a 2 minute difference there, but nevertheless, St. Louis FC had originally been given credit for that goal. It's now been changed to an own goal. Really doesn't matter. You love the effort that was going on that one to end the game, racing down the right side, crossing it back in, getting the goalie to commit, getting him to come out. The keeper had to force a shot. They went towards the end line. Sergio Menestio ended up knocking it in for Ottawa. But it was one of those that I think it was kind of 6 in one, half dozen in the other, because it was close to crossing the line anyway. He just tried to bicycle it out. Didn't work. Ended up roofing it into the top of the net. And St. Louis FC deservedly, in my opinion, gets the 3 points. Now, obviously, as a fan, I'm a little bit biased, but even as a broadcaster, they played well enough to really deserve those 3 points. Ottawa probably deserved a little bit better for the way that they ended the second half, or excuse me, should say started the second half and really kind of played the entire second 45 because they had the game in their grasp in that second 45. St. Louis FC was perhaps a little bit fortunate to come away with all 3 points, but also deservedly so as well because they played well enough throughout the game. A little bit disappointing with the way they were kind of defending, trying to absorb a little bit too much pressure in the second half. But overall, a very great start to the home season for St. Louis FC, and hopefully something that's going to get things rolling for the team here as we start to really churn in everything. We've got the vote coming up in St. Louis. Obviously, I won't be able to take part in that, despite the fact that I've moved further north. In case you've noticed the different surroundings, living in a different apartment now, so just trying to get used to the surroundings. Got a new computer and everything. That's why everything kind of looks a little bit different. Kind of work on the lighting and everything, but still, it's a new chapter. Turning the page, getting things rolling here. St. Louis FC off to a great start, and hopefully really starting to build momentum towards the future, both in this season and for the future of St. Louis soccer. But for now, that's going to do it for today's post-game wrap-up as my brain just starts to leave me here at the end. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a follow on YouTube. Give me a follow on Twitter. It's at TPAN25. And I hope to see you the next time out at Toyota Stadium. And it should be a good time because I think St. Louis FC is really going to have a pretty good season this year. But we'll have to see. Hope you'll join us then. Until the next time, I will see you then.